the memo that hijacked American democracy and how Democrats can take it back. This is not, some brand new revelation, but it just doesn't get discussed anywhere near enough. And that is that during the last 50 years, while Democrats have been carefully trying to, do public policy and expand health care for people and expand educational programs and reduce student debt and reduce medical debt and clean up the environment and, basically provide for a good and positive future for ourselves and our world. Well, Democrats have been doing all that good stuff. And by the way, bailing Donald Trump out his presidency by passing the American Rescue Plan and well, actually, I think that was in the first weeks of Biden's presidency, whatever it was called when it was Trump, getting money to people and just the whole thing. I mean, Democrats were at the lead of all of that. In fact, Republicans, by and large, voted against most of it. And not a single Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, either in the House or the Senate, for example. So anyhow, while Democrats have been busy doing the people's business and trying to, keep the lights on and keep the government working, Republicans have been doing something quite different. They've been trying to consolidate their power. And they've been doing it through the age-old method of first seizing and then poisoning the channels of public information. Thomas Jefferson famously said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Well, Republicans are taking that to heart, right? It's an old script. I mean, it's been played out in Russia and Hungary most recently. Back in the 30s, we had other countries, Spain, Germany, Italy. But, want to seize control of a nation and turn it into a neo-fascist state with the consent of the people? Just take control of the channels of public information and news. And, like I said, over the past 50 years, while Democrats have been focusing on $35 insulin, Republicans have been focusing on buying and interacting with, creating a symbiotic relationship with right-wing media. And, I mean, this was not a secret that they were going to do this. This was the Powell Memo in 1971, Lewis Powell. Nixon put him on the Supreme Court the following year, where he started putting his plan into action by voting for the Bellotti, well, actually he wrote the Bellotti decision in 78. In 76, the, Buckley versus Vallejo decision he voted in favor of. And that began, and those two decisions said that money is free speech and corporations are persons, and therefore billionaires and big corporations can involve themselves in the political process, which prior to the 1970s was illegal. So that was 76 and 78, and what that did was it greased the skids, no pun intended, for the oil industry to just roll Ronald Reagan into the White House in 1980 on a tsunami of fossil fuel money, on top of the fact that Reagan conspired with the Ayatollah to hang on to the hostages to screw Jimmy Carter, something that somehow bizarrely never even got mentioned during Jimmy Carter's funeral, and it should have been mentioned every single hour. But anyhow, these details are rarely discussed, but nonetheless, Democrats need to know about this and they need to fight back. So first, Republicans realize that if they want to seize political power, they first have to seize public opinion. And then secondly, they realize that if they want to control the government, the Senate is the single most important thing. Well, actually, the judiciary is the single most important thing, but the way you control the judiciary is through control of the Senate. Now, how do you get control of the Senate? Well, it's part and parcel of how you get control of public opinion. And what they did was they started building out. First of all, they started buying radio stations all across America, and local newspapers, particularly in low population states, because they knew if they could flip a bunch of low population states from Democratic to Republican, then the outcome of that would be that they could control the Senate. The Senate is, basically our anti-democratic, or it's the least democratic of our institutions. I mean, you got Wyoming with 800,000 people has the same 2 votes that California with 39 million people has. That is not small d Democratic. So what they did was they started buying and building out radio and television stations across low population states, where it's very cheap to buy these stations, by the way. And the same with local newspapers. So in Wyoming, in Montana, in Iowa, and Nebraska, and Kansas, and Alabama, and Mississippi, and all of these relatively low population states or poor states where media is inexpensive. And by the way, this also happened in some of the larger states like Texas and Florida. They basically bought all the media. And in 2008, Air America had been broadcasting for 3 years, and in 2000, and frankly, the consensus was that it was Air America that helped get Barack Obama elected in 2008. We were on 57 stations in America. There was pretty much no place in America, and on big sticks, big stations that blew big signals statewide. In some cases, signals that would cover 2, 3, 4 states. So there was, it was fairly easy, pretty much anywhere in America, to tune into Air America and hear me or Al Franken or Randy Rhodes or, Sam Cedar or Janine Garofalo and, Mark Maron, et cetera. So in 2008, Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's company, bought Clear Channel because Mitt Romney had decided after John McCain lost in 2008, he decided he was going to run in 2012. So his company bought Clear Channel. All of our stations were Clear Channel stations, or at least 54 out of 57, I think, of them were Clear Channel stations. And over the next 2 years, till 2010, they just took us off the air, one after another. And the result, of course, was that it bankrupted Air America. They couldn't sell advertising if they didn't have any listeners. And that was the end of that. And thus, Republicans, now they've got 1,500 right-wing radio stations. They've got about 800 religious broadcasters, nonprofits on radio, who also constantly broadcast right-wing politics. They've got about 300 right-wing Spanish-language stations broadcasting politics. We saw the outcome of that in this last election with a big shift in the Hispanic vote toward Republicans and Donald Trump. They started buying newspapers. Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. Billionaire Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. A right-wing billionaire physician bought the Los Angeles Times. Right-wing hedge funds run by right-wing billionaires in New York City control about half of all the local newspapers in the United States. So basically, the entire media infrastructure shifted hard to the right. And along with that, the new media, which now accounts for, over 50%, 54% of Americans get all or some of their news from social media. X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, WhatsApp, all this stuff is owned by two right-wing billionaires now, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. And they've shifted to the right. So how do Democrats respond to this? Democrats need to be doing the same damn thing. They need to build out think tanks. Part of my article goes through all the Republican think tanks and state policy centers. They need to be building out think tanks. They need to be buying and building out media and expanding existing media organizations. There are a bunch of smaller low-power FM and smaller FM, smaller progressive stations. There's a whole network of them. Democrats should be supporting them. They should be supporting some of the stations. Basically, I think they should be supporting all of the stations that I'm on. If you can hear my voice, Democrats should be helping out the Democratic Party. Like the Republican billionaires support. The Heritage Foundation used to give Rush Limbaugh $2 million a year. They used to give Hannity $1 million a year back in the early days when these guys were still struggling. This did not happen organically. The Rush Limbaugh show didn't just appear. It was suddenly on 50-some-odd stations with really good funding and a big national footprint and a very, very competent PR firm. The guy who is our business manager was, involved in that rollout. This was no secret. This was big money coming in to put a right-wing voice on the air. Democrats need to wise up.